The way a team plays as a whole determines its success. You may have the greatest bunch of individual stars in the world, but if they don't play together, the club won't be worth a dime. That's from Babe Ruth. George Herman Babe Ruth is regarded as one of the greatest American sports heroes and the best baseball player of all time, at least depending on who you ask. He's a legend. He started out as a left-handed pitcher and then shifted to play as a hitter on his off days, to eventually becoming a full-time outfielder and everyday hitter in the starting lineup. This was partly due to the strategy of a manager and partly due to his desire to be a player who contributes to the team every day. So, according to Babe, if the team is not in sync, and that includes the players, the managers, and even head office, with the team strategy, the executional tactics, the energy and dynamics, it may not achieve success. It potentially could, based on the strong talent pool. This brings me back to encouraging you to build a real estate investment team that can help you to make well-informed, high-quality decisions for your real estate investment. In the past episodes, we met with team members such as a mortgage broker, a certified property inspector, a first-time investor. Today, I'm excited to have another critical team member join us during this episode, a real estate lawyer. 3 things we'll cover today include the importance of including a real estate lawyer on your team, reviewing a few definitions and why you need to understand what they mean and potential implications, and then providing you with an overview of the role of a real estate lawyer plays in a residential resale transaction. Welcome to the podcast Real Estate with Nicole, where we bring you the latest insights and trends in the real estate industry and equip you with the knowledge and tools to make informed decisions. Today, we have a special guest with us, Kate Saldanha, who is a seasoned barrister and solicitor with Proust Dash and Crouch LLP. She has over 13 years of experience practicing law in the GTA. Her areas of specialty include wills and estates law, business law, and the focus of our discussion today, residential real estate law. Kate has worked on numerous cases and has helped her clients navigate complex legal issues in the real estate market. She's able to assist her clients to make well-informed decisions, whether they are developing an estate plan, owning a property, or making business decisions. Kate offers her clients strategic legal thinking that is both compassionate and supportive in matters which are often emotionally charged. She's an active member of her community and volunteers her time to many nonprofit organizations. In her spare time, Kate enjoys yoga, travel, and photography. We are excited to have her here today to share her expertise and insights with us. Welcome to the show, Kate. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. I want to really get into the importance of a real estate lawyer and why it's important to have one on your team, whether you're a first-time home buyer or you're a seasoned investor. So I just like to kind of give you a little scenario where I work with some clients and I ask them, do you have a lawyer? I always ask them about the members of their team, if they have a mortgage broker, property inspector, etc. And I always ask about the lawyer. And they say, oh yeah, we'll get to that. And I say, well, actually, it's important for you to have one now or to have one identified now. And I just wanted you to give us a little bit of flavor why it's important to have a real estate lawyer and the timeliness of identifying one.
There's probably a bunch of reasons that it's a good idea. Number one, you want to have a comfort factor and a trust factor with someone who's going to be helping you with such a big decision. So just like any of the other professionals that are part of your team, you want to know that you can communicate with that person and rely on what they're telling you and have that kind of trusting relationship. And that doesn't happen overnight. You want to make sure that you have that initial comfort factor, that you feel good about that choice that you're making. So there's that. There's the comfort factor. This is a big process, a big investment. You want to be comfortable. But then there's also the unknown factor. So we all hope that, we're going to find our dream property and everything's going to go smoothly and nothing to worry about. But unfortunately, it doesn't always happen that way. There can be surprises or things you're not expecting at any point in the transaction, including before you actually sign an agreement. So at any point, there could be things that you might even just want to ask your lawyer or say, hey, I'm not sure about this. What do you think about that? And so the earlier that you have them involved in that process, it opens that opportunity for you to be able to have those conversations and ask those questions. Similarly, we are also able to review documents for you. So sometimes, maybe you're not working with a realtor or you're buying from a builder. You don't have anyone that's necessarily representing you and helping to walk you through the details of what you're signing. And that's something that your lawyer could do too, if that was your situation.
Thank you for that, Kate. And also, I just want to kind of touch back on in a previous podcast, we talked about having a real estate action plan. And you really hit on some of those points in the sense that if you have an idea of what you want to do, whether it's pre-construction or resale or you're a first-time home buyer, it's important to have you in the picture early in order to understand what your strategy is for real estate, and then how you as a lawyer can help them and inform their strategy and how they might want to do something based on what you've seen.
Yeah, and I think related to that, sometimes people have an idea of that strategy without some of the key details, or at least from a lawyer's perspective, the key details worked out. So for example, maybe you're buying an investment property with a business partner. Well, how are you going to take ownership? What agreements are you going to put in place as to how much everybody is contributing to pay the expenses, and how are you dividing profits? All of those sorts of things are, from, again, a lawyer's perspective, something you want to work out well ahead of time and get sorted. And those are the kinds of things that we can help guide clients through. But if you come to us at a late stage where you've already signed agreements and you have stuff in place, you start limiting your options. Having those discussions about different options and how you might structure things and how you might take title and a whole bunch of things will really inform the rest of your decisions too.
Yes, I agree. And as you mentioned on a partnership with an investment property, I think we're probably going to be seeing, or I've been hearing, about people having joint ventures in residential properties. So down payment is a big issue for a lot of people now. And so people are coming together with others, and having a lawyer involved early to discuss these particulars and making sure that both parties are on the same page. I don't know if you have any anecdotes you can provide with regards to that kind of a situation.
I do, and I think the one I'd like to specifically focus on is actually the family context, because what we see a lot of is the bank of mom and dad helping out their child, whether it's with a down payment or maybe being jointly with them on a mortgage to qualify for financing. There's a lot of ways that often parents and child, although obviously it could be any relationship, but a lot of family relationships where they are involved together with the purchase or the financing. And I think it's easy for people to kind of gloss over some of those preparations and thinking about formalities and how is everybody protecting themselves because, well, that's my kid, right? And I get it, but at the same time, we're talking about a lot of money, and you have to treat these things like a business decision, even if it does involve family. So again, ideally, you want to have those conversations early. You want to let your lawyer be the bad guy who says, hey, we need to have these things figured out. You need to have these hard conversations. We need to make sure that everybody's protected. And you want to do it early. Unfortunately, I've had situations with clients where everybody thought that this was the understanding. you get to the eve of closing and now, well, that's not what I thought you were doing. And what do you mean you want me to sign this or that? And that's not a good situation for anyone. Very stressful to be in a situation where you figure out that people are on different pages and now you're so far along in the process, you're pretty much forced down one path, whether everybody likes it or not.
So get it out in the open and get it on paper and make sure that everybody is clear on accountabilities, responsibilities, etc.
Absolutely. These are big decisions with serious consequences and a lot of expense behind them. So everybody has to be on the same page.
Right. It's better to spend that little money up front because, people are always trying to curb their expense, but just putting this little investment up front saves you so much from the back end, and not just money, but heartache, broken relationships, different things like that.
Absolutely.
All right. So yes, timeliness is critical. I wholeheartedly agree. The sooner, the better. And if you can develop that relationship sooner, all the better for you. So now I want to get into a couple of definitions. These are definitions that we see on the agreement of purchase and sale, on almost every agreement of purchase and sale. And I think it would be great to ground everyone with regards to the definitions of some of these, and then, delve into why it's important to understand these definitions. So the first one I have is encumbrances. If you could explain what an encumbrance is.
Yeah, so an encumbrance is basically anything that we would describe as a cloud on title. So anything that could potentially impact you or someone looking to buy your home in the future, as to the quality of your ownership, the ability for you to, do things to your property and use your property without any kind of restrictions. So an encumbrance can come in all forms of things. Sometimes it's restrictions about what you can actually do with your property, things like easements, could be a mortgage or a line of credit. It could be something called a notice of security agreement, where you might have financing for something like an air conditioner, for example, that actually gets registered against title as well. So it could be a number of things, but anything that would potentially be problematic on title. Not that it's bad or an actual problem, but could be.
Okay. Maybe I could give an example where I live right now. There's an easement to my property on both sides. So basically what it is the distance between the homes is such that if my neighbors on either side need to make repairs, need to access the roof, need to do something with the fence, they would need to just come and ask me or let me know that, some service people are going to be here and we'll need access to your side of the property so we can do these repairs. So that's kind of the easement where you would have to have a nice working relationship with your neighbor. And you realize that is something that's would be required if you're purchasing a property. And sometimes I think people don't understand this, and it becomes something that puts a strain on neighbors.
Yeah, and I think just related to that as an example, it's also a really good example of an encumbrance does not have to be a bad thing, right? It's good to have something like that easement or a right of way to allow people to do what they need to do. A really common easement that we would see would be in favor of hydro or telephone, for example, so that they can have access, to inspect and repair lines, that sort of thing. I think we all can agree that that's important things that we want to be able to happen. We want to have our services restored, but the trade-off for that is that those companies need to have access to certain properties, and that's one thing that an easement could give.
So the next definition that's closely related to an encumbrance is a lien. Can you give us a little bit on a lien?
Yeah, so a lien is just a specific kind of encumbrance. There's different kinds of liens for different things, Probably the most common one that people might encounter is a construction lien. So if you've had work done at your property and there's been a dispute, it hasn't been paid in full, the person who's provided those services could have the ability to put a lien on the property to make sure that they have some security for the work that they've done and protect their bill, essentially. That's probably the most common one.
Okay, and with a lien, does the owner know that that article has been placed against their property?
So typically, yes. With a construction lien, for example, usually that gets registered but then becomes part of a litigation action. So something that would go to the court. So there's several processes along the way where you would be served with documents, you would receive notice. So the likelihood of there being a lien on your property that you don't know about is probably pretty low, because there are things to protect you in those kinds of situations, with the obvious exception that, if a lien got registered today, you might not know about it tomorrow morning, for example, but in the normal course of things, you would typically know.
Okay, so it's rare because some homeowners I've said, "Oh, I didn't know I had a lien." So it's just it's good to know that it's something that they should be aware of if it wasn't like in the last 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, so I don't want to get into so much detail that we're splitting hairs, but where I hear a lot of clients saying, "Oh, I had no idea that anything was registered," is actually the notice of security documents that I was mentioning earlier. So a lot of times if you're on like a payment plan for something like HVAC equipment, maybe a water tank, something like that, a lot of times those get registered. The document is called a notice of security interest, and that does show up in the land registry office's records. And a lot of times people are not aware that it is going to be registered there. So whether that's just not clear or it's buried in the paperwork, I don't know, but that does come up a lot. It's not technically a lien per se, but it is kind of the same idea.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you for that clarification. So the next one that comes up, or the next term, is title. I think everybody thinks they know what title is, but I'd like you to explain it and maybe give a reason why it's so important.
Well, I think this is probably maybe a more simple definition than you're expecting. It's the ownership. So it's important because, well, it's the ownership. That's pretty darn important stuff. So, title, at its core, we're talking about who is the owner of a property. If you want to delve into things more, you're looking at, okay, well, how is that property owned? So if there's more than one person on title, more than one owner, what way do they own that property? If we're looking at a title search, now we're also looking at things like, is there a mortgage on the property? Are there other encumbrances? Anything we need to be aware of. On the full title search, you'll also see a legal description for the property. So that's going to help make sure that you're buying what you think you're buying, because occasionally properties are made up of more than one part and you want to make sure you're getting the whole thing. So I think when you're thinking title, ultimately you're thinking ownership. It starts to kind of spread in terms of what we're looking at when we're concerned about title, but at the core, we're worried about ownership.
Okay, excellent. And then the last term, it's not necessarily in the agreement of purchase and sale, but is something that mortgage brokers or financial institutions, lawyers, real estate agents, that they need to conduct an assessment. And it's FINTRAC. So it's the Financial Transactions and Report Analysis Center of Canada Assessment. Just to spell out that acronym. Can you give us a little bit more on FINTRAC?
So I can and I can't. I can in that it is something that we have to comply with, but it's not anything that's particularly client facing. That's requirements that we have behind the scenes in order to comply with those FINTRAC rules, and also to meet the requirements of the Law Society of Ontario. There's a whole bunch of obligations that we have, so it's the reason why we ask for things like ID. We need ID for our file. We may ask you other questions that you may think, why the heck is my lawyer asking me this? It's probably because we need to comply with some regulation or law society or other government body.
Okay, excellent. So those are kind of the key definitions that I wanted to touch on with regards to agreement of purchase and sale. Kate, is there any other definition that you have seen or that's popped out in your mind that you think would be valuable for people to have a good grounding on?
Nicole, I think if we go down this path, we might be here all day. So I think I'll take them on the fly if we need to.
Okay, excellent. All right. So I think you kind of touched on why understanding these terms are important, just by defining them and what they mean. And I think we'll get into more with regards to the title search, etc., when we get into kind of the role of a lawyer, a real estate lawyer, in the residential resale transaction. So I was wondering if you could kind of walk us through that process, what it would entail from a seller perspective. So when somebody's selling their home and you have the agreement, and then perhaps walk us through from the buyer perspective, maybe parsing out what might be slightly different.
Yeah, so I think let's start super high level because kind of procedurally and what would happen with the client and what they would experience is very similar as far as both a purchase and a sale. So you would be reaching out, connecting with your lawyer. Normally, we send out some initial paperwork asking for things like your ID and other information that we're going to need in order to complete our file and the work that we need to do. So normally, there would be a relatively early on exchange of information. Once we have everything that we need, we use that information together with your agreement of purchase and sale, together with your mortgage instructions if you're purchasing and getting a mortgage. We consolidate all of that in order to prepare all of the paperwork that will be necessary to complete your transaction. We'll meet with the client shortly before closing. So typically anywhere from a couple of days to about a week before closing would be roughly the time range that you would expect. We would sign off on the necessary paperwork at that point, and then on the closing day, we'll reach out and let you know once everything is done. If there's any issues that come up at the last minute, fingers crossed that there aren't, we would reach out to you at that point as well. But otherwise, those are kind of the major interactions that you would have with your lawyer. Typically, if you're having other interactions, something is not going right. If everything's going smoothly, that's kind of it, that you have those kind of initial exchanges, one main meeting, and then a follow-up conversation once everything is done.
Okay, got it. So now let's get to kind of like maybe the nitty gritty in the sense of the title search. I'm just going to go right to the title search and what it entails, what you're looking for. We went through those definitions. So what you're looking for and what you're looking for. Let's go with that first.
Yeah, so we are doing a title search on every transaction. Typically on sale transactions, we do obtain a title search too, just so that we're not surprised. So going back to what I was mentioning earlier, for example, with those notices of security interest, a lot of times people have no idea those are registered against their property. And if there is an amount that needs to be paid out and removed from the deed, the title, which is also known as being discharged, just like you would with a mortgage, we need to communicate with whatever company has registered that notice of security interest ahead of closing, just like we would need to communicate with your bank ahead of closing to know how much we need to pay to discharge your mortgage. So we normally pull that information so that we know who all we need to deal with and we can get started on it early. From the sale side, that's really kind of the extent of it, because on the purchaser side, it's the job of the purchaser's lawyer to do a more thorough title search to see if there's any kind of encumbrance on title that is problematic, or a non-problematic one that just needs to be dealt with as part of closing, like discharging an existing mortgage. We want that wiped out when the new owner goes and takes ownership. So the purchaser's lawyer is going to be doing that review. They're going to be looking at the records available from the land registry office and basically coming up with a to-do list almost, where they're saying, okay, seller's lawyer, these are the things that I need you to take care of in order for us to close. And they might be very routine, like discharging a mortgage, or they could be more problematic if there is an issue with the title for whatever reason. What that could be a huge range of things. Something old, like maybe a mortgage from a previous owner that just got missed for some reason that needs to be cleaned up. Maybe it's a problem related to something with the Planning Act. I mean, the possibilities are endless, and I won't bore you by going through everything. But essentially, we're trying to make sure that once our client becomes the owner of this property, they have good ownership, and there's nothing that's going to negatively influence the quality of that ownership for them while they own the property, or when they go to sell to someone else. We don't want them to have any sort of problem.
Exactly. And if you do find a notice of security, and say it's quite large, have you come up with any instances where the seller, there's been a challenge with having the seller clear that off?
So I have had scenarios where clients have said, no, I shouldn't owe this much, and they've had a dispute as to the amount with the company who's registered that notice. So again, all the more reason we want to find that out as soon as possible, because if there is going to be any sort of negotiation or dispute, as the case may be, we have to start that as soon as possible so that we have enough time before closing to get it dealt with. Things like a notice of security interest or a mortgage or a line of credit, those have to go. If they have not been dealt with and arrangements for them to be paid as part of the closing, we cannot close. So the sooner we're able to deal with it, the better, because unfortunately from time to time, we do have those situations where for whatever reason, there is a dispute and we have to negotiate or figure out what the heck has happened so that we can resolve before closing.
Right. And typically, I know it's typically 10 business days between title search and closing. So depending on the scenario, if it's clean, that's, it's a breeze. But if there's a hiccup, then...
Yeah, the more time, the better, because you never know what you're going to find. You hope that you don't find anything interesting. That's a good day. But sometimes, depending on what kind of issue you find, it may take a couple of days to resolve. It may take weeks or months to resolve if it is a more unusual or complicated kind of issue.
Okay, awesome. And so that's kind of like the title search. And I want to go into kind of like the closing statement or the disbursement. So you mentioned that you do the disbursement for the funds upon closing. So what does that entail? What can someone expect when that process is happening?
Yeah, so if we're acting for you as a purchaser, essentially what we do is we figure out, okay, how much still needs to be paid to the seller, how much needs to be paid for things like land transfer tax, how much are our own legal fees. We total up absolutely everything. We deduct any mortgage money that you're expecting to receive, and then we say, okay, here's the total of what we need you to give to us so that we can close. So on the purchaser side, we basically consolidate all of the money, direct it where it needs to go, and that's that. On the sale side, it's pretty much the same thing. We're going to have essentially the total amount of money, and then we will take care of making a number of payments. So real estate commission is something that we pay, existing mortgages, line of credit, bridge loan, notices of security interest, if there are any. All of those are things that we would normally pay from the sale proceeds before any money comes back to you. Other common things, sometimes if you have arrears of your property taxes, for example, we might be paying some property tax on your behalf. Basically, anything and everything that needs to be paid out in order to give clean ownership over to the purchaser, we'll take care of paying for you. And then whatever's left after all that's done, will return to you once we've made all those other payments.
Right. And I just from personal experience, I know the lawyers provide a very nice summary of all those disbursements. So it would be great for you to keep that as part of your records, just so you have that for future reference if needed. Another item that I wanted to touch on was title insurance. I wanted to talk about what is title insurance and why is it so important?
Yeah, so title insurance has been a bit of a hot topic for a while now. It's existed since around the year 2000, so it's not terribly new, but we have been hearing a lot more about it of late. I'm sure some of your listeners will have seen coverage in the media of these horror stories where, I went on vacation and I came home and somebody else was living in my property and said they were the owners. And what the heck? So, what title insurance is a product. It's an insurance product, of course. It helps you protect you against things like identity theft, fraud, someone challenging your rightful ownership of the property. So it's different than your classic home insurance where, if there's a fire, for example, your regular home insurance is going to help provide you protection there. But if there's an issue with your ownership or the quality of your ownership, that's where title insurance comes into play. So typically where we see this is on the fraud side. That's perhaps the most sensational example. But it also provides protection if, for example, you buy your home and then you realize at some point that, oh my gosh, the neighbor's garage is overhanging the property line onto my side. It provides protection for issues like that too. So with those fence line kind of disputes, there may be protection for things like that. So it does offer a lot of benefits. And it's a little different from home insurance too, in that you buy the policy once and it's good for the ownership of the home. So it's good for many, many years. You're not paying a monthly or an annual fee of any kind. It's just a one-time thing, and then you have it. Hopefully you never need to use it, but at least it's there. It is like, say, car insurance that, just like your car insurance doesn't prevent you from getting an offender bender, if you're in one, it'll help to restore you back to the place you would have been before that collision happened. Title insurance is kind of the same thing. It may not stop a fraudster, for example, but if that happens to you, they'll help provide benefits and coverage to restore you back to the position you would have been in.
Right. So like in those scenarios where people come home from vacation, they had somebody else is living there, but they have title insurance. This is a situation where they could use that to assist them with rectifying the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, title insurance is one of those things that at this stage, really, we don't close any purchases without it. If you are getting any kind of financing, your bank will 100% require you to have that coverage regardless. But even if you're not getting financing, we would never recommend that you close without it. It's a good product. It provides a lot of benefits. And for the cost relative to what kind of benefit you could get out of it, which, I hope nobody ever does. You don't want to win at insurance in that way. Nothing good has happened if that's the case. But if you do need to make a claim, like in one of those stories, the horror stories, that would be incredibly expensive if you had to pay the bill yourself, and the investment in buying that insurance in the first place will most certainly pay off.
All right. And I have a question for you. a question for you with regards to just being a real estate lawyer. What have you seen has been one of the biggest misconceptions when you've worked with clients, when they come to work with you?
I don't know if it's a misconception per se, but I feel like by the time that people are far enough in the moving process that they're getting to the lawyer, sometimes it almost feels like we're just a box to check off, right? A thing to kind of do. And what I would love for people to just, think about and kind of let sink in is our job is to make sure that you are getting quality ownership on probably one of the biggest purchases you're ever going to make. You have to take this seriously. It sounds obvious, but it's a huge process to buy a property, and if it's for your own use, you might be moving. There's a lot that's going on. And you don't want to find yourself just, going through the motions or being kind of checked out of the process by the time you get to your lawyer. We're doing important stuff that's really critical, and you want to be in a place where you can ask lots of questions, take an active role, and really get involved because it's pretty critical.
Very critical. It's real estate purchase is one of the biggest purchases in anyone's life, typically. So I would reiterate that it's important to have a real estate lawyer as part of your team as soon as possible. You may not be using them all the time, but developing that relationship and having a lawyer, one like Kate who does wills and estates, real estate law, business law, someone who practices in all areas. You can use them for various as your need arises, and you develop a relationship with them over time. So, Kate, any last thoughts that you'd like to share with regards to residential resale real estate and using a real estate lawyer and the importance of using a real estate lawyer?
Yeah, I think I would just reiterate what you've been saying all along, Nicole, which is, we're an important part of a larger team. There's things that I'm going to be worried about and looking for as your lawyer that are completely different than what you would be looking for and worried about as a realtor or a mortgage broker or any other part of the team. And the best way for everybody to work together is to work together. So, the earlier that you bring your real estate lawyer on board and are able to introduce them to your realtor and your mortgage broker, if the whole team is able to communicate and function well and have that relationship with each other, it just puts everyone in a better position because now we're able to, have those communications, help move things along, clarify issues. There may be a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes in amongst that team that the client may never even hear about, right? We're able to kind of work those things out because we're all looking at things from a different perspective, and we can all offer different, benefits and services and ways to deal with things that, aren't going to be the same. The way that I might resolve a problem, it might be different than how you might be able to resolve a problem. But if we don't all have the opportunity to communicate and work as a team, it's going to be a much more difficult experience for everyone, including at the center of it, the client who's buying or selling.
Awesome advice. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Kate, for being a guest today and sharing your insights and knowledge with regards to resale residential real estate. Thank you.
You're most welcome. It was lovely to have this conversation with you.
If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. That's a quote by Sir Isaac Newton. Building on the experience of those with expertise will help you to develop an action plan to suit your goals and to execute the actions needed to achieve the goal in the timelines you set out. Or, if necessary, pivot and alter your plan as the situation dictates. Excellent traits to look for in a real estate lawyer include someone who is compassionate and thoughtful in their approach to your needs, someone who pays close attention to details and is organized, someone who is skilled in thinking strategically and providing guidance for you to make well-informed decisions, someone who you are able to build a relationship with and trust in order for you to make well-informed decisions. Like what you hear? Follow us on your favorite podcast app today. Please leave us a rating and a review. I'd like to recognize my producer, Stories and Strategies, for their excellent work. The last thing you could do for us is to share this episode with one friend. Thank you.